Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Lindstad, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. A few housekeeping bits of information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. We will assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. Right, some introductions. Councillor Heaney.
Sorry about that. Councillor Heaney, I'm the Labour Group spokesman for Traffic and Transportation.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Harris.
Yeah, Councillor Scott Peter Harris. I am the Conservative spokesperson for Traffic and Transportation.
Thank you. Tristan.
Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Michelle.
Michelle Love, Safer Travel Manager.
Kevin.
Kevin McKee, Parking Manager.
Thank you. Is that Denise hiding behind there?
Yeah, Denise Bastow, Parking Office Manager.
Thank you.
Felicity Tidbury, Assistant Director for Transport.
Gareth James, Solent Transport's Future Transport Zone Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Hayley Chivers, Acting Transport Planning Manager.
Damon Learn, Senior Transport Planner.
Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
Thank you all very much. I don't think we have any apologies, do we, Jane? Okay, thank you. Members, declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? None? Scott? Okay, lovely, thank you. So we'll go on to the first item, on-street residential charge point scheme, phase 2, 6-month review. And that's Hayley, are you presenting this? Thank you.
Thanks. So this is an information report providing an update on phase 2 of the on-street residential charge point scheme following 6 full months of operation. The scheme has installed 62 electric vehicle charge points in residential streets which do not benefit from off-street parking. The solution utilises spare electricity supply from lamp columns with charge points fitted directly into those at the front of footway or into slimline bollard with electricity fed under the pavement where the lamp columns are at the rear of footway. The key points to highlight from the monitoring of the first 6 months of the trial are usage of the charge points has seen a 19% increase in electricity consumption. The top used sites received on average 20 charging events per month, with the top site seeing on average 39 charges per month. There are 9 sites which have received minimal use and the reasoning for which will be investigated further. However, 5 have yet to have designated parking bays marked due to no confirmation of EV ownership. And overstaying is occurring during daytime at some locations, and these will be investigated and appropriate action taken to ensure equitable access to the charge points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney, any comments or questions?
Not particular ones. I mean, I note the comment being made about the overstaying ones, and I raised that at the briefing meeting we had and asked some questions about that. And obviously that's being investigated, so I'll obviously wait to hear what comes out of that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Harris.
After I've just quickly just looked at this again. On 4.2, it says about the remaining 7 bays have not been marked to ensure that there is not any impact. I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. I had a couple of residents that have actually gone to have these put in and they haven't had the bays marked. And there's been instances where they've had to actually go back out to a TRO. How many instances of that have we actually had? Because I can just think of 2 that I've had to deal with.
I don't know the exact figure on that. We basically, at the time of installation, we check EV ownership and mark them if we know. We then go back to residents periodically, or they come to us and we mark them in phases. And there are some remaining now that have been unmarked for a while.
That's fine. I just think it's just worth noting that obviously the people are buying the vehicles. It's just the time it takes for the vehicle to actually get into their possession, which is becoming a bit of an issue. As someone who has an electric vehicle on order, I know that it's painful to wait for these vehicles. 5.4 of the report talks about these 7 top locations, which I think is quite interesting. With the highest usage, is that more than one vehicle? Or is that multiple vehicles? It doesn't actually state it within in the usage.
So we can't tell whether that's multiple vehicles or the same vehicle. We don't monitor which vehicles are using the charge points. We just got the number of charges.
Okay, no, thank you. I just thought it would be an interesting figure to know, and obviously 5.7 says about overstaying. And I think that's something that we all know that does happen. I think it's just a case of monitoring it. Also, be able to talk about the consumption of the electricity, because obviously I imagine that with all the energy pricing that would have risen. And what is the price rise on that?
So as it stands, these ones are with Joju, and they have not at present had an increase in the price. Ubitricity have seen an increase in their prices recently, and we are working with Joju. That is likely to follow.
Just then, when those increases do come, are you able to circulate it to members, just so we have an idea of what we're looking at for those people that are purchasing electric vehicles, so we can get the information out?
Yeah, definitely. We'll send that around.
Thank you for that. It's a very good report.
Can I ask just one thing? In 5.8, it says some locations where the vehicle is plugged in for significantly longer than the vehicle required to charge. I may have issues overstaying. Can we do anything about that? I mean, I suppose this relies on CEOs going and picking up.
So at the moment with overstaying, there's no time restriction on the bays, so there's nothing to stop a vehicle doing that, and that's where we're trying to understand on a case-by-case basis why they're doing that, whether it's because there's parking congestion in the area, they're the only EV in the area. So we're just reviewing them individually as to what the reasoning is. We may be able to do some letter drops in the area to explain polite sharing, and if need be, we can sort of put financial disincentives in place.
And presumably, if I've seen the map showing the list of places that were requesting EV charging points, presumably local residents will be told that they may have to share with somebody else close by.
Yeah, we're quite clear to residents when they apply that these are not their private private space. These are to share for all residents in the area.
But they might need a reminder nearer the time. Okay, that's great. Any more questions? I'm glad to see that there is quite a demand. I realise you've got to get funding for more, haven't you? To put in more charging points? Yeah, we've got phase 3, we've got over 300 requests. We're just working on getting funding for. Brilliant, lovely, thank you. So it was just an update, so I'm glad to see it's being so successful. So thank you very much. Next one is Portsmouth Rental e-scooter trial extension. Is that you, Gareth?
It is indeed, Councillor Stark, yes, thank you. This report provides an update on the operation of the rental e-scooter trial and seeks approval to further extend the trial from the current scheduled end date, which is the 30th of next month, November 2022, up until the 31st of May 2024. So the recommendations they are that we note the information contained in this report on the rental e-scooter trial to date, including Voi's commitment to continue running safety skills events and providing complimentary helmets to attendees at the events. Approves renewal of the vehicle special order for Portsmouth's e-scooter rental scheme to the 31st of May 2024 in accordance with the DFT's new end date to legally enable the trial to extend beyond its scheduled end date of the 30th of November 2022. Approves the extension of Voi's contract initially by 12 months to enable Voi to continue operating the trial beyond the scheduled expiry of the current contract period. And also notes that an update of the rental e-scooter trial would be brought to this meeting in September 2023, as well as any decisions that would need to be made about the service with respect to the remainder of the trial or the post-May 2024 period. So for the detail of the report, what I'll do is just pick out a few pieces that I think are either well worth reiterating or are newer information compared to the previous reports about the e-scooter rental trial that have been brought to this meeting. So in terms of backgrounds, It's, again, worth reiterating that the Department for Transport's only permitting the trial of rental e-scooters, so the use of privately owned e-scooters on the public highway remains illegal during the trial period. The DFT had originally planned that all its trial schemes would end by the 31st of March 2022, subsequently invited trial areas to extend them to November 2022. Then on the 12th of May 2022 this year, the DFT sent an email to all authorities and operators running the trials outlining its plans beyond November. That email is attached to this report as an appendix and outlines how a new low-speed, zero-emission vehicle category is to be created. And then a little later, on the 28th of June 2022, the DFT sent out a further email indicating that ministers had approved an 18-month extension of the current e-scooter trials to the 31st of May 2024 for all those areas that wish to continue. And that email, again, is included as an appendix to this report. So just looking at again, something that I think is very important to reiterate is that the parking for e-scooters in Portsmouth, it's a fully racked scheme, and that would continue with parking racks located in tightly geofenced mandatory parking zones. Rental e-scooter users must leave the e-scooter in a parking rack at the end of their ride. The geofencing technology ensures that the rides can only be finished there. This has resulted in a very low number of complaints compared to the more free-floating micromobility services, and this approach that Portsmouth pushed for is becoming increasingly popular in other e-scooter trial areas around the UK. As regards safety, the safety skills events, which were mentioned in the first recommendation, they've been very well received by attendees, with 97% of respondents feeling positive about their learning experience and stating they now feel more confident using a rental e-scooter than they did before the training. I think the feedback really reinforces the importance of providing these in-person training opportunities to beginners, as well as the mandatory online training that's delivered through the app, especially while e-scooters remain a fairly novel mode of transport. So just a couple of quotes in there. One of them, someone said, "I'm so happy I did take the course before riding. It's no toy and certainly not as easy as it seems watching others. It will take a bit of practice to get the hang of it properly. I've now enjoyed the first ride and can't wait to go on my second." So I think that came across in the survey and in the counsellors' feedback, which I'll come on to a bit later as well, the importance of continuing with offering these in-person events. For enforcement, just a reminder again that Voi's distinctive scooters carry a registration plate, so anyone can report any wrongly parked e-scooter or bad driver behaviour. All the contact details are in the report. You've got the user form web address. You can also call a free phone number, or you can email support@voiapp.io. So all of those ways are available, and if you don't catch the registration plate, then you can just give as much information as you can about the time and location and so forth, and Voi will use that to identify the person involved.
Can I butt in there, Gareth, and give the number, because I have to keep looking it up, but I've reported quite a few, and the Voi people at the other end of the line have always been very, very supportive. So for anybody who's watching, I'm sure there'll be hundreds of people watching a TNT decision meeting, and the number is 0800 376 8179. Am I right? Yeah.
That's exactly right, yes.
Good, and I think we need to publicise that a bit more, because I think people get frustrated if they think they have to give the registration plate, and it's not always easy to see it, because particularly if they're going past you quite quickly. Thank you. Carry on.
Thank you. And so for the key statistics for the trial to date, so obviously updated since the previous extension. So these figures are up to the 15th of September, so just about a month ago. So the number of unique users in Portsmouth now is just under 60,000, so it's 58,857. Together, there's 1,245 kilometres of, 1,245,000 kilometres have been travelled, and that's total rides is 446,876. Really importantly, when we think about what the aims of these trials are, the number of car trips replaced is now coming up close to 200,000, so it's 196,625, and that equates to a carbon dioxide equivalent saving of 105 tonnes, and that's just the Portsmouth scheme alone. The number of unique users has grown by 65% in the last 7 months. Coming on to survey data, which I know is something that we discussed when we were in the meeting regarding the experimental traffic order extension. So we were, as planned, we've carried out an additional survey. That's the fourth council survey about e-scooters. That took place between the 8th of August and the 4th of September. Excellent response rate. That's the best response rate we've had so far, with 3,508 responses. Encouragingly, the survey showed that 54% of respondents would have used a car or a taxi for their last journey if they had not used a rental e-scooter. This is broadly consistent with the survey findings from the earlier waves, and a far higher figure than in most cities abroad, showing that Portsmouth's rental e-scooter scheme is providing a genuine alternative to private car use. In the report, it's some of the findings are summarised, and there's a full appendix which goes into all of the detail of that survey. Broadly similar findings to the earlier surveys for those that are acquainted with those. But I would encourage you to have a good look at that and ask any questions that emerges from it. On to safety. Of course, vitally important, so we always spend a lot of time and effort scrutinising these figures. As noted in the report, there's 252 accidents reported in the trial to date. That word accident can be a little bit misleading. It's 124 of those are damage only, so that's things like a phone falling to the floor, for example. But moving on to the actual injuries, it's 104 slight and 24 serious.
Can you explain what serious is? Because people think that people have had their legs amputated or dire consequences. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Department for Transport definitions are what for use. What we find is that, first of all, it's important to say that all the reported serious accidents involve injuries only to the user and not to other road users, such as pedestrians. What we've got now is that there's been some independent analysis conducted by STEER in early 2022, and we've had some more recent independent analysis which is ongoing, both of which have indicated that the number of serious injuries is lower than those statistics suggest. Several of the VOI incidents are ones that can't be verified, so they aren't able to find out from the user, what the result of the accident was, and there's no accompanying data. Also, VOI and I believe the other operators sort of err on the side of caution, so you'll see that the 24 accidents to date, most of them are very much at the sort of lower end of the serious scale. We're not talking about life-changing injuries. We're talking more about leg injuries and so forth. Certainly things that you would recover from. I think something else that isn't in the report, because again it's from that more recent piece of data that's worth mentioning, is that the accident rate we now know has gone down, which is what you would expect as with an e-scooter trial, as people become more accustomed to using the e-scooters and they become more normalised, and we've seen that in Portsmouth and indeed in Southampton, which is also run by VOI, that the accident rate for e-scooters is going down as the trial progresses, which is extremely encouraging and something that we'll continue to monitor closely. So I hope that's answered your question on that, Councillor Stagg.
Yes, lovely. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Shall I go over to questions from councillors? Councillor Bater-Harris?
Thank you, Chair. And bear with me, I'm going to go through the trial opinion survey, wave 4 findings. So if everyone want to go to that, that'll probably be the best place to start. Obviously, we've looked at I'm just going to go into the management summary that's continued to impact on other modes of transport. It says it's reduced usage of public transport at a consistent level since the start of the trial by around 37%. Is that like a knock-on effect? So effectively, people that aren't taking bus journeys, aren't using taxis, aren't using trains. Is that what we're getting at from that finding?
Sorry, Councillor Pate-Harris, can you just please repeat which finding you're referring to? It's obviously a lot in there, so I just want to...
Yeah, no, it's in there, Gary. You know where the survey starts. So basically, go to the e-scooter rental survey, way 4 findings, and it's on the top paragraph. It's the top line, so it's impact on other modes of transport.
Yeah, thank you.
What is the number on the page?
It doesn't actually have a number on this page. I think it's page 41.
Yeah, page 41.
It's there, but it's like in the middle of the text.
Okay, so this is on the appendix. Yeah. Sorry, just bear with me a second. Okay, so in terms of how the e-scooter trial affects usage of other modes of transport, yeah, I think first of all it's worth noting that the wave 4 results are consistent with previous waves. So it showed reduced usage of public transport at a consistent level since the start of the trial, by around 37% for those using the e-scooters. So that's the figure you're talking about, yeah?
That's exactly it. The point I'm getting at, because if we have a 37% knock-on effect, do we know if that's affecting certain routes more than others? Because I think the issue we're having is we subsidise buses regularly and we subsidise that sort of transport. And if people are not getting on a bus and all of a sudden getting on a scooter, no doubt the bus company will turn around to the council and say, "Oh, you owe us, we need to subsidise this route," because they're jumping on a scooter and our levels are down. That's what I'm getting at. So I think it would be conscious if we could find out in future, just future information, what routes are being affected, because clearly some are on that point. Is that something we can do, Gareth?
We can certainly take that away and look into it. At the moment, I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't have any way of knowing if particular routes were being affected, other than looking at where the e-scooter service is more sort of densely offered, and which trips that might affect. I think it's just worth mentioning on this as well, because there was somebody that was asking recently about the effect on walking as well, and it's very easy to look at that survey and to see the portion of people that are doing something less than before, whether it's walking or using public transport. But what you also find, and you can see on the Your City, Your Say summary of this research, is that you also see those people that are using public transport more than they did before the trial. So it's a smaller percentage. Walking actually it kind of evens out, but it really gets at the fact that if you're not needing to take a car for that first part of your journey and you've got these different options to get around, then you might actually be walking and potentially taking public transport a bit more, because the scooter doesn't do the whole job for you. So I think it's worth mentioning that, but we can look a little bit more into what, as you say, the sort of more spatial impacts of it.
I just think the detail could be there, because obviously I think we had a paper recently where it's showing that bus journeys were considerably down in certain areas, and obviously we're talking about e-scooters here that are actually having an effect on public transport. So there's going to be a knock-on effect there, that obviously people can see it's a cheaper mode of transport, because quite frankly buses are expensive to get around in the city. I think that's quite widely accepted by a lot of people, and the scooter is a lot cheaper. And now with the advent of the barrel bikes coming in, I think we're going to see that as well. Let's move on to something else. So I'm looking at, I'm going to be really benign and go through this quite religiously. So we're going to go to postcode and age, and it's obviously, 27% of the sample, which is a total base sample of 3,119. Sorry if I'm boring anyone, I don't intend to, what I do actually. But PO4 is obviously clearly the big area, which is obviously in Southsea. Just for clarity, it doesn't actually say it in the report, but I'm assuming that's where more of the racks are, to make more sense of why it's at 27%, when, for example, PO6 and PO2, which has minimal racks, which is, I would say, Cosham and Hillsey area, would be the same number, but yet, not as big.
Yeah, there is. What I can say to that is that there is a strong correlation. I basically put the two maps together on my screen and had a look, and there is a very strong correlation. What we're going to do is again just work on some a finer grained version that we'll be happy to circulate to you and others here. But it's intuitive, yeah.
That would be great. I just think that sort of information would be quite interesting to see, because it'd be obviously who the users are, what journeys they're taking, and how and what methods they're taking to get there. Right, 2 seconds. I've got. No, that's not relevant.
Gareth, is it possible when you do your surveys, you ask how would the hirer have previously otherwise have used a car or taxi? Could you put in public transport there? Could you add it to the survey?
Yeah, that's one of that's where that data comes from, Councillor. It's basically asking how you would have made that journey, it's got essentially every
but
option.
Obviously, that wouldn't give you the route, but it
doesn't give you the route. No.
Just interesting, Gareth. I'm going to look at the.
Do you want to have a look?
No, I've got it here. Okay. I've got all the pages folded over that I'm going to. I'm well in there. Don't worry.
Good.
I'll stop in about 6 pages time. No, probably about 8 pages actually. So if we're going to look at page 59, I think that's talking about the barriers to users with a comparison to previous waves. It's quite a really good chart, Gareth, if I'm honest. It gives us an idea of what people are doing, which I quite like. And it's obviously wave 3 and 2 and 4. The interesting one that I've picked out is safety concerns. That's a significant jump in terms of the numbers from wave 2 and wave 3. So obviously users are saying that there are probably more safety concerns rather than what there was previously. I mean, is there anything that's been highlighted in the findings that you could probably pick to that, saying why that has jumped?
No, so we did look at that, and it's popped out at us, of course, as well as something to keep an eye on. We're very fortunate that we do get a strong response to these surveys. I think with safety in particular, we don't want to kind of just put it down to variance, but it could vary from one to the next. I think based on that feedback, also the feedback from the members that attended the feedback sessions and a lot of the other safety-related questions in there, it was really paramount. The reason the first recommendation in this report isn't about extending the trial; it's actually about continuing to offer to offer those training sessions and promote helmet use. Is that we need to just continue to hammer home that message. I've got a meeting with Roy within the next couple of weeks to look at the plans for 2023, offering those training sessions not just at Lakeside and in Guildhall Square as we have done so far, but in other locations in the city. So maintaining that, even though people are becoming more accustomed to using e-scooters, just to not let up on that, and looking at how we can sort of more proactively tie in with planned cycle routes as well. This report again strongly conveys the fact that where e-scooter users feel most safe is in segregated bike lanes. So we're working closely with the other teams in the council to see where those connections make sense. So again, I think that the sort of finer grain of information can be quite hard to get from these surveys. You almost want to go back and ask the people that reported that what their reasons were. But there is a lot that we can take from that, and indeed from sort of members' feedback as well. So we'll continue to work on that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think it's a good answer. Page 62 is talking about other forms of transport. So when we think back, the question is thinking back to your last rental e-scooter trip, what mode of transport would you have used for your journey? I think it's conscious as well that the base numbers for wave 4 and wave 2 are considerably higher than wave 3, and I personally, looking at the base number for wave 3, I would not use that as a something to measure against. I'd rather go between 4 and 2, because I think you've got a significant number there. And it's quite interesting that the private car is the same effectively. It hasn't really moved, which tells me that we've still got not the same amount of people, but the same amount of mindset. So we're not actually moving the needle as much as potentially we would have liked to. And I just think it's interesting to see how we would do that if we are going to proceed with the trial. How are we going to get more people using? Because that seems to be a barrier at the moment. It's not really moving between 2 and 4. Wave 2 and 4, sorry.
I mean, what I would say to that is the percentage that's coming across in the Portsmouth Council survey it is very much at the higher end of any expectations that we had, going into this trial, looking at sort of international benchmarking, as well as national. The VOI surveys, which get slightly fewer respondents, also showing over 45%. And for Portsmouth, the surveys have shown between 55 and 60% coming from car or taxi. Overwhelmingly, that's going to be car. And I think honestly, when we first saw that for Wave 2, we were just desperately hoping that as the scheme grew and became, had far more users, that percentage would stay the same. Because, of course, if it stays at 55% and you're talking, many hundreds of thousands more trips, then that's why we end up with so many trips off the road. So not to say that there isn't more that can be done. It'd be wonderful if we got that up to 70 or 80%, but I would just manage expectations by saying that any time I'm presenting this to counterparts in other cities, then they're looking at what are we doing right to copy. So
that's it, but we should always strive for better, as I say. But well done anyway. Page 68, Gareth, we're going to talk about, this is going to go into the nature of the attitudes towards e-scooters. I think this is really the crux of the argument that comes across. And I think it's some really good data, by the way, when it talks about, if anyone's gone to sleep, I apologise. The rental e-scooter should be banned from Portsmouth. I think that's the one that's got users and non-users across Wave 2, 3 and 4. Obviously, non-users have contributed far more to the argument than the users, which I think is something that we need to put out there. I think it's good for the public to know. The position really hasn't changed for non-users. They are quite consistently at 66, 65%. They want it to be banned, whereas it has slightly dropped on the user side. Which is that because people are going away from e-scooters, or is it just the sheer fact that we have seen a neither argument that's risen? So I think there is people that are going in the middle at the moment, and I just don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, what sort of feedback have you had?
Yeah, again, it was something that we noticed that had gone down a little bit, and it's something to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be at all surprised if when we do the Wave 5 survey, it comes back, you are going to get that kind of variance, but again, we don't want to sort of rest on our laurels with that, and if there's people that have used the scheme that wouldn't recommend it to others, then both for us and for VOI, it's understanding why that is. We know that the main reason still that those who the main barrier that users of the scheme see to using the scheme is the availability of parking, and of course we're continuing to work on that and to kind of expand the reach so that people do have both their origin and destination locations within a relatively short walk. So hopefully, as again, as that continues to expand, we'll see that number at least kind of stabilise and ideally go up. The last thing you said was very interesting as well, which is there doesn't seem to be, it's a kind of Marmite thing. There doesn't seem to be much in between. It's either people saying that these are great and they would recommend them, or they very much wouldn't. I think that it's inherent in these surveys, though. You're going to hear from people that have that strong view on one side or the other, and users, non-users, and so forth. And I think it would be interesting if we were able to go out and kind of speak to sort of people in the streets a bit more and find out their views, which of course you do as councillors. And I know that generally you've reported, as we've seen as well, that the feedback has become sort of warmer to the trial over the course of the trial, and actually the main issue that people are still raising is with the private scooters, which of course haven't got all of these controls and limitations and scrutiny in place. So it's hard to capture that in the data, but I think that's something that we're all feeling quite confident about at the moment.
Okay, on page 71, it's talking about the overall attitude, and I think that is key to the feedback that you've received, because to say it was positive would be wrong. Just from the overall data that you have, it's mostly a negative attitude towards it. It's well into 60, 65, nearly 70% in certain waves, which isn't ideal, is it? I mean, I understand it's not ideal, but obviously we've got to make a decision about whether we continue today, and that's thankfully not my decision, it's Councillor Snagg's decision. What I will say is about the sample data, because it's clear that we've already said that users are having less of a say than non-users as effect, but we know that there are several hundred people who have had trips on. How are we going to engage in a more thorough way to get, because I would like to see this sort of thing carry on, by the way, to see if we can engage people that are using more to have their say, because at the moment it's a very one-sided argument, and the data stacks as a one-sided argument. It would be very easy to use a data set and say, we need to change something or something's not working. But obviously I want to see how you would change the way you engage, because there's clearly people out there that are engaging, but not to the number of the non-users.
Yeah, again, it's an ongoing challenge with engagement and consultation exercises. The consultancy that has been helping us with the monitoring and evaluation of this scheme, which I mentioned before, in the context of the safety data, is TRL, and that's a long-term partnership that Solent Transport has with them to help monitor not just the e-scooter trial, but other aspects of the Future Transport Zone programme. So I'll take that away and speak to them about ways that we may be able to, I think, as you say, get a more representative sample. It's mentioned in this report as well. It was something that we did for Wave 3 when we were using some other independent consultants helping, is if you reweight the survey data according to the age demographic profile of Portsmouth, then straight away that has an impact. I think it was about 5% or so, sort of more positive, and so it's quite nuanced, and I think we can look at what we could do to help you to better understand what those sort of middle views are, if you like.
I've got to be honest, it is really thorough and it's really well presented, and it's a really good report. So I just want to say thank you for bringing it. It's good to see that we're doing these exercises where we're actually getting significant data back to us. Also, we're just going to...
Councillor Peterhouse, could I ask, if you've got any more questions that are that detailed, could you sort of email them to...
No, I'd rather do it in public.
Gareth?
It's fine.
Only because the other people...
No, it's fine, we've got time.
Okay.
I was just finishing up anyway, so don't worry.
Didn't understand a word of that, sorry.
I was just finishing up, so don't worry.
Right, okay.
No, as I was saying, Gareth, it's very good. The overall report in itself, it shows that we need to do something and something has to happen. But personally, the jury's out still for me on these. I just want to see more information coming forward. And I'll let Councillor Graham Heaney have his say now, because I'm sure you're all bored.
Thank you, Councillor Peter-Harris. Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I don't have any problem with detailed questions being asked. I think it's appropriate to do so, so it doesn't bother me. No, I'm fine. In relation to the survey, I mean, as far as the surveys goes, I'm not sure if everyone who's watching this is aware, but as far as I understand it, the survey is purely a respondent-driven survey, i.e. people who respond are the ones we have actually got doing the survey. This is not a survey that is determined by a process of some sort of scientific sort of attempt to get a representative sample. It's just the people who responded. And it does seem to me, looking at that it's quite often the case that if people are against something, they're more likely to respond to something than if they're for something, or if they're reasonably, don't really bother one way or the other. So I suppose that might account for the fact that we have a fairly high level of response, and I don't know if that assumption is something that the people doing the survey would agree with. I've got another couple of questions as well.
Thank you. I would just add, I think when there's legislation controlling not just the voice scooters, but the private scooters, as privately owned scooters as well, you'll have a change in... there'll be some people who'll be dead against the scooters, whatever, but they're going to be here, forever. Well, until the next phase of technology comes along. But I'm happy to agree to extend the trial purely and simply because I think with more evidence from all over the country, because it's not just here, it's all over the country, I hope the DFT will come up with some legislation. For example, having insurance, the quality of the bike, of the scooters being made, there needs to be some legislation. You can't just build a car that is rubbish and will fall to pieces. So you need to have something that's... And that's quite solid. And that's one of the things about the voice scooters. They are sturdy. But we've also got to get people behaving properly on them. And I've said to you, Gareth, I've noticed more people riding on pavements, and I shout at them, or I report them. And, well, they have to, they're supposed to be behaving in a sensible, safe way. But the thing is that we don't ban cars, for example, you know. I mean, on one day last week, there was a car that was overturned in Tangier Road because it was going too fast on Tangier Road, hit another car, went onto its head, onto its roof. The car in front of me earlier in the day was speeding, went through a red light, and then there was a bit later on a car behind me which was tailgating me, which I stopped and had a bit of a discussion with the driver. So, you know, we can't be just down on e-scooters, but we need to have that legislation in place that covers it. And then I think we get a different response, because if you take them, some of those private ones off the road. One was my dog walking friend, someone that you know, Councillor Heaney, was in Bristol, I think it was Bristol, a couple of weeks ago, at a lecture. He's a lecturer at the university. And he didn't see one single privately owned e-scooter in Bristol. He saw plenty of trial ones, and I think the reason is that in Bristol the police have been enforcing, which they haven't been doing here. So that was just one place, obviously. But so I'm happy to go along with both the recommendations.
I do have other questions. I did say I had other questions.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. No, I said I have other questions.
Oh,
I
didn't hear that. You speak so quietly that I can't hear. Okay, I'm sorry.
I've been talking most of the day to my students, so maybe my voice is a bit wrong. In reference to paragraph 5.15, I noticed we talk about the accidents there and the statistics, and I just wonder, I don't expect an answer now because I was thinking about it actually when I was reading it the other day, that is it possible to do some comparison with the accidents on scooters and accidents on bicycles? Because clearly we have an issue around bike safety and bike accidents. And I just wondered if we would be able to do some sort of comparison to see whether voice scooters are any more dangerous for people who are riding them or less dangerous than cyclists, or what. It would just be an interesting comparison, I think, to do with this mode of transport.
Well,
if we can
Michelle
would
have the statistics on
I'm not expecting a direct answer.
No, but what I'm saying is Michelle would have that information, I think, wouldn't you, Michelle? Not now, but...
No, is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I actually I responded to a ward councillor's inquiry about that quite recently. So it was, I think it's we would all like to know that comparison for sure. It's what we've got to be really careful with is that we're comparing with apples, and the accident rates that I'm sure Michelle has at her fingertips for cycling and other modes at the moment are very, very difficult to compare with the e-scooter accident rates. The reason being, and this is what, not just in the Solent and not just our consultants, what we're all finding is that the most reliable data sets that we have are from the operators. It's self-reported, but it's most reliable because the police national database doesn't have an e-scooter category. And even if in the free text box it does say e-scooter, it then doesn't say whether it's a private or public e-scooter. We know from some work that our consultants have been doing for us recently, different police forces are all filling it in different ways. So although we are looking at Hampshire constabulary data and doing some cross-checking to just really help to understand better what the accidents are, where they're occurring, etc. In terms of an accident rate, the best that we have at the moment is the one that's coming from the e-scooter operators themselves, which makes it very hard to compare. That said, we do of course have a bike share scheme that's just begun in the city and indeed in Southampton. So we're already starting to look at, although it's a different operator, what kind of comparisons could be done there to help us to get a better gauge on that difference.
And Councillor Stagg sort of touched on it as well about the issue of the private scooters and enforcement. And whilst it's not necessarily the main focus of the report, I do think it's relevant because people, I don't think necessarily make a judgment between e-scooters and the the rental scooters and the private ones when they're making their views known about their use. I mean, it would be useful. I know Hampshire Police are under a lot of pressure. They've got a lot of other things to do, but it would be helpful to know, or if they would be prepared to let us know, what they are doing about the enforcement on this, because it's very clearly not legal to use them. I think it's very difficult. Well, it's possible people don't know it, but I mean, it's very difficult not to know it because of the amount of information that's put out about this. But it is still an issue, and also it's an issue of safety for those individuals who use them, because they're often used in a way which is clearly not as safe as maybe someone using a rental e-scooter who has decided to use that for particular reasons. I have to say, I think the retailers also have some responsibility here. I actually went and had a look back in September in some of the retailers to see what they sell, and I was quite amazed at some of the size and scale of some of these things, and the little notices they tag on them saying, you mustn't use this on the road. And I would be quite interested to know. Well, I didn't actually get a chance to talk to anyone because there was no one around, but when somebody is buying one of these, are they really sitting down and telling them, actually, you're not allowed to use this except in your garden or on your estate, wherever you live? I don't mean housing estate. And they may well, or they may well not, but very clearly they are selling these things and they are disclaiming responsibility for what happens to them afterwards. Now, they might say, well, yes, it's up to the individual to decide what to do with them, and that may well be in part true, but they do have some responsibility here. It may also be that people are acquiring these scooters, not via normal retailers, but via the internet or whatever, which again is an issue. But I think it does tie into this idea of enforcement, and I do think that I would like to see the police being a bit more upfront and a bit more public about their enforcement of this, so people know something is being done and sends the message that these things are not legal to use, because there is going to be a crunch coming when and if the government gets its act together and does actually legislate about this. They will have to make some decisions, because I don't think we can sit with the current situation where we have private e-scooters being sold and other e-scooters being legal and not doing something about the private ones. I think there will have to come a crunch where they have to say that you are not allowed to sell these things unless they are licensable or meet the required standards. And that crunch is going to come at some point. So I do think it would be helpful if we maybe started to do something about this now, with the police enforcement, but also making people aware that they shouldn't be riding these, and they will probably be unable to once they become legacy scooters, which people will have in their garage or wherever, and will not be able to use them.
Gareth, do you meet with the police? I know Hayley used to.
Yeah, we do. It's again, certainly something that we would echo. I think so we were all looking forward to some clarity around the private scooter sort of laws and rules post May 2024. One thing I would say that I do know from a recent meeting that the DFT is working hard on that. They're taking a lot of feedback from stakeholders, including ourselves at the moment, to help shape the plans for that. In terms of sort of Hampshire Constabulary, yes, we have regular meetings with them. We've got one actually in the next couple of weeks. I've already made a note that we'll raise that with them just while you were speaking, Councillor Heaney. I think it would be last time we knew that London was the London Metropolitan Police was the only force in a scooter area that was sort of actively seizing private scooters. I think just because the scale of the issue was greater there. And essentially other forces, including ours, were keeping a sort of watching brief and giving out some warnings. But that's probably about 9 months ago now that was their official position. So we'll pick that up in a couple of weeks now that we know these trials are continuing for the best part of 2 more years, to see if that's still the position or whether there'll be sort of stricter enforcement action that could be taken. So I'm happy to report back on that as well. Thank you.
Is it worth our while writing to the Police and Crime Commissioner and asking for her support? After all, she used to be councillor here, calling some favours. But I think it might be just highlighting it so that something might come out of it. Have you got any more questions, Councillor Heaney? Okay, thank you. Right. Well, I'm as I said before, I'm happy to go with the 2 main recommendations, which is approving the renewal of the vehicle special order and approving the extension of the voice contract initially for 12 months and noting everything else. Thank you. Right. We're now on to item number 5, which is proposed one-way streets between Winter Road and Eastney Road. Is it Michelle, are you presenting this? I thought you might be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. Yes, I'm bringing the report subject TRO 5822, proposed one-way streets between Winter Road and Eastney Road. The purpose of the report is to consider the recommendation in line with the consultation results to implement the proposed one-way streets on Maxwell Road, Langard Road, Tredegar Road and Reginald Road. The recommendation of the report is that the Cabinet member approves the implementation of TRO 58/2022 to implement a series of one-way streets, including contraflow cycling, following resident engagement and formal consultation. To go through the background of the report, the one-way proposals were initially raised with members through their interactions with residents, either on street or in surgeries. There was a statutory consultation of TRO 58/2022. The TRO process invites objections to the advertised proposal. There were objections received, and a copy of these is included in the report in Appendix B. As a result, and to further test the acceptability of the proposals, the Cabinet member for Traffic and Transportation requested that further engagement was carried out. This was done between the 13th and the 20th of July, when the Portsmouth City Council Transport Engagement Team engaged with residents door knocking on street to give them three options of a preferred traffic regulation order design: option 1, option 2 or no change. In total, 168 households responded to the residents' survey, representing a response rate from the total number of households of 36%. Out of those responses, 75% were in favour. 55% of those respondents were in favour of a one-way streets design proposed in option 1. That's the basis of the report, but I'm happy to take further questions after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, I have one question. I mean, obviously the residents have been involved in this and it's very much a ward particular issue, but I just wondered if the Cycle Forum had been made aware of this proposal and had been asked for any, or have got any views on it.
The Cycle Forum have always given the view that if we are going to implement one-way streets, that they would like to see contraflow cycling. So the resident door knocking was quite ward specific within the roads, and we obviously hold regular meetings with the Cycle Forum to keep them updated of schemes. If this scheme is given approval at the meeting, then we will involve them in the final design.
Anything
Right,
else,
so
Councillor
they haven't had any view of this prior to this decision meeting taking place. That was the understanding I got from the answer. They haven't actually seen this, and
there hasn't been a final design to present, so the consultation has been resident specific within those roads, but they obviously will be involved if approval is given.
Nothing else? Right. Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you. I'm just looking at this, and this is literally on the border of Central Southsea Ward that the one-way street goes up to, because it splits at Winter Road, which is obviously on the borderlands, effectively. Were the Central Southsea Ward councillors discussed with, because this is going to cause a knock-on effect to them and people that live in Central Southsea?
This was initiated by the Milton Ward councillors.
Yes, I know that because it's in Milton Ward, but it's on the ward boundary, and I think commonly it would be quite a good idea to involve the Central Southsea Ward councillors, because there will be a knock-on effect for the traffic going one way onto Winter Road.
Absolutely, we can. If this report is given approval, then we will certainly involve the Central Southsea Ward councillors.
The problem I have with it is that we've already done the work, and effectively they've been excluded until effectively at a decision-making stage, whereas it might have been a good idea to get their feedback earlier. I mean, I've had instances that in my own ward, for example, that have bordered onto Nelson Ward or bordered onto Cotton Ward, and we've been engaged with both at the same time. And I'll give you a good example, would be Mayfield School, about the issues around there that have been caused issues recently, and we've had joint briefings because one will knock on the other, and this is very similar. and yet the Central Southsea Ward councillors are probably being shortchanged effectively, because this is going to affect them, and yet they've not been consulted on.
Can you specify the impact it's going to have?
Well, you're changing the road layout, so effectively you're pushing all the road going one way, and it's not going into Milton Ward, it's going out of Milton Ward into Central Southsea, so it's pushing it onto Winter Road, which is going to have a knock-on effect to the people that live in that side of the ward, and no one's asked them the question.
The opposite will be true as well when the other side goes out onto Eastney Road.
Exact point, and I mean this is what I'm talking about. So we're getting one set of. I mean, I think Councillor Heaney knows exactly where I'm going with it. That they should have been consulted, because they might have actually said that this is causing an issue. And it's, for example, and I'll give you a great example. If we were doing a parking zone and it was causing a knock-on effect, you'd survey the people around it, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just do it in that site area. And I'll give you an example of the HC parking zone, where the people were surveyed around the area. Yet the Central Southsea Ward Council, I don't even know why I'm speaking up for Central Southsea, it's probably for fairness more than anything, but they haven't been consulted, and that's the biggest issue I have with this. You know, I don't have an issue that people want it, because I think it's quite a sensible idea, but if we're doing things, we have to ask the questions in the correct way and involving everyone on the journey, because what I don't want, this could be perfectly fine, Michelle, this is really hypothetical, it could be perfectly fine. I mean, what I don't want is us to implement something, and then all of a sudden, we're getting lots of people that live on the other side of Winter Road, in Treadgar Road, for example, which is I'm going to use, or Aston Road or Hunter Road, that are saying, or saying that all of a sudden I've got lots of traffic that are pulling out, and they're using us as a cut through, because obviously they've already had a one-way street put in through. So I just think that they should have been consulted. That's really my main point. It's right on the border of the two wards, where it's all the traffic's getting pushed to in one way, and they haven't actually been asked the question.
I personally can't see. It would be 50-50, wouldn't it? I may be entirely wrong, but it's the same amount of traffic, but it's just...
Yeah, but you're pushing the traffic all one way. This is the point I'm making. It's on the border. The actual border, I mean, I've got the map up. It's literally, the traffic is going from there to there, and it's pushing it all down here. So it's going to naturally go into this cycle. It's right on the border. Then you should have, really, in hindsight, you should be consulting both sets of water. Well, it's a Milton scheme, it's going to impact on Central Southsea. That would be the sensible thing to do, but we're so far down the line that nobody's actually done that.
Do we normally do that?
It's not the case of whether we normally should do it, it's what we should do.
I'm just asking if we deviated from what we normally do.
We haven't previously done that, but I can see Councillor Pater-Harris's point, and if they would like it built into future consultation processes, then we absolutely would do that. With the case of these roads, they're residential roads. We've done traffic surveys. There's an average of 26 vehicles per hour travelling down each of these roads. So, as you say, there's 50% of now what we will have is 50% of the traffic going one way and 50% of the traffic going the other way. If there was a higher number of vehicles travelling along those roads as they stand at the moment, then we would obviously look further into mitigating measures that we would need. But they obviously are at the moment residential roads that are used by residents. So 26 vehicles an hour coming out onto the Eastney Road or Winter Road is unlikely to change. We will obviously monitor the scheme, and then if the volume of traffic has increased, because that is a risk with one-way streets, that it can then be attractive to motorists, then obviously we will put in place mitigating measures to ensure the safety of residents and pedestrians. But at the moment, as it stands, it's around 26 vehicles per hour in each direction.
Thank you.
That's a fair point. I just got a couple of other bits. I'm just going to go to the Director of Finance comments, because I think that's quite interesting. It says this scheme is going to cost £40,000 from the one-way streets and low traffic neighbourhoods allocation, which interestingly you said we don't have low traffic neighbourhoods last Tuesday. So maybe we should change the name of the pot of money.
No. Curtin, are you talking about the article in the news?
Yeah.
No, I've taken it to task, because I've made it clear it was not a low traffic neighbourhood at all. And I'm not the only one who's taking him to task.
Yeah, Councillor Bosher called it a low traffic neighbourhood, not you. So no, and it says the funding's 40,000. Just out of interest, is the pot of money, is the overall pot of that £120,000?
That's correct. It's identified in the capital budget 2020-2021.
Absolutely.
And the overall pot is 120,000, with 40,000 being allocated towards this scheme and the remainder being allocated towards the active Pompey neighbourhoods. The reason that it's called low traffic neighbourhoods is because it was published and decided before our scheme, the active Pompey neighbourhood, came into being.
So we all know that active Pompey neighbourhoods is a nice name for low traffic neighbourhood. It's just because LTNs haven't got a really good positive reputation over there in the press. So, I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. We all know the truth. If you Google low traffic neighbourhood, it's quite damning, especially in London. You know, for example, I mean, the officer, some officers there are smiling, so they clearly know that I'm right. On this point, so 80,000 being allocated for the Central Southsea scheme, is that correct?
That is correct. The active Pompey neighbourhood is in Central Southsea.
Active Pompey neighbourhood, brilliant. On message and on brand, Michelle, well done.
Always.
But that's it, thank you. That's all I've got to add. Very good.
Thank you, Councillor Pater-Harris. Yes, I'm happy to go along with, I can't remember what the, approve the implementation of TRO 58, whatever. Thank you. Well, I think it's something we need to sort of look at in future, but I'm not aware in my time as portfolio holder that we have consulted with surrounding areas when we've done something like this, but I could be entirely wrong. Right. What are we on now? Item number... Oh, yes. Item number six, disabled persons parking places. And is that you, Kevin?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
The report concerns a proposed disabled parking space outside 53 Old Farm Way. The resident meets the criteria for having a bay. We advertised the proposal and received 10 objections, 4 from residents of Old Farm Way, 3 from residents of Denville Close, 2 from family members, and 1 representation. It wasn't clear where the resident lived. The full text of the objections is detailed in Appendix B of the report. Old Farm Way is a road where vehicles park on one side on the road, and on the other side they tend to park partially on the carriageway and partially on the footway. There have been disabled bays on the carriageway previously in Old Farm Way, outside number 45, and the traffic flowed okay. Again, with the bay on the carriageway and other vehicles parking up on the footway. We have a number of other examples of roads that are narrow where that happens and traffic still flows. But if there was an issue, because we've got a proposal for a bay on the carriageway on one side, if vehicles parking on the opposite side of the road caused an issue, we could introduce a double yellow line to stop it, but that would make it more restrictive on the residents parking in the area. So we're recommending implementing the bay as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Scott.
I don't envy you, Councillor, on this one. It seems to be a really difficult decision to make. So I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So back over to you.
Have you got any questions? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions actually. I was presented with a written deputation from a resident when I came into the meeting, and at the end of the deputation the person says that I would like to personally attend and have sent a deputation request to Democratic Service, but I'm yet to receive a reply. Could someone enlighten me on to what happened to that, because they are not here? We do have a written one. Is it that they've changed their mind and we've got the written one, or have they not had a response to their request to have a deputation? What's the situation?
Jane?
Chair, yes, we have had further correspondence with the resident, and they said they're not attending, so they would like you to, you all to consider their written deputation that you have. It was sent to you this morning.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said there's a deputation, I forgot it was buried.
Yeah, I mean, some of us who are at work aren't able to access our council emails when we're working, so we don't see this until we come here, which is why I come straight from work, so that's why I haven't seen it. And so I wanted to ask the question just to clarify, because I have read the deputation very quickly and just saw that point at the end and wanted to clarify the resident had been given an opportunity to do that or had resolved the issue. That was what I was clear at. Another question about the on the Appendix B, we've got the public views, we've got 2 photographs which were sent in. Were those photographs sent in by the resident making the comment? Is that the case?
Yes, they were.
So they are, right, that's the ones they sent in, okay, right. That's useful to know. I just wondered if Kevin's got any comments on what the deputation has actually said about their concerns and how he might answer them. I'd be interested for his view on it.
Yes, certainly. I think in the deputation, the resident gives different measurements to the road, but even if you take those measurements, vehicles can still pass if there's a bay in the road, and even if there are vehicles on the other side parked up on partially on the carriageway and partially on the footway. So it doesn't change our recommendation in that respect. I think the resident making the deputation is currently parking 1 car on their hard standing and 1 car on the carriageway outside their drop curb. I mean, what happens in other parts of the road and what happens in that part of the road is currently the vehicles are parking on the north side, slightly up on the pavement, and fully on the carriageway on the south side, where the person making the deputation lives. If we put a bay on the north side, it might be that the person on the south side parks slightly up on the pavement, and it just swaps over the order in which that occurs.
With regard to the 2 photographs that accompany the deputation, they do show disabled bay that is partly marked. Are these old ones or existing ones that already are in use or not?
I believe the photograph, as I referred to in the report, there was a disabled bay outside number 45 of Farmway, which was fully on the carriageway. I think the photographs show that marked on the road, but because it's not in use anymore, vehicles are parked fully on the carriageway on the opposite side of the road. I believe when that bay was in operation, vehicles wouldn't have parked directly opposite, because that would block the road. What they might have done is parked opposite, slightly on the pavement. As I say, as you go down Old Farm Way, the vehicles do park on the carriageway on one side and on the footway on another, and it swaps over halfway through.
That's useful to know. Thank you for that. I mean, this essentially is again a ward-specific issue. I'm not hugely familiar with the road. I mean, I know of it, but I don't walk down it regularly. Have the ward councillors made any representations on this at all, either for or against, or do we know? They expressed a
no.
No. Okay. Well, I mean, like Councillor Panderas, I think I'm going to leave it to the cabinet member to make the decision, because I think we may have to modify it if it goes ahead, but I don't think I've got a particularly strong view about this one, so I'll leave it to you to decide.
Kevin, can I ask you, in 6.2 it says the resident associated with the disabled bay is currently parking in the road, so there is little effect on the availability of parking space. Okay, so the person who is asking for this disabled bay is already parking on the road, yes? So would the disabled parking bay be significantly wider than the space taken up by the car that currently parks on the road?
The disabled parking bay would be 1.8 metres wide, and it would be on the carriageway. What currently happens is vehicles on the side that the resident lives currently park partially on the footway,
right,
and the cars on the opposite side park on the carriageway. But if we designate a bay on the carriageway, then it will push the vehicles to park slightly on the footway on the opposite side, and you can still get cars through. So it's not taking away parking, it's just reordering the way in which they move around the vehicles parked on the carriageway, if that makes sense.
So if there are disabled parking bays, as they are in this photograph, and the cars parked there, how do cars get in? There's enough room. Do they act almost like a chicane? The disabled bay?
Well, if it swaps over halfway down the road, then they'll chicane round. It's the width of the road doesn't change, and currently there's cars parked on the carriageway on the south side and partially on the footway on the north side. So what we're saying is we're putting a bay on the north side, which will be fully on the carriageway. So it will push the cars, if they still wish to park there, they could still park on the partially on the footway and partially on the carriageway on the southern side, and there'll still be the same width of carriageway for vehicles to get through.
Right. So on that basis, I don't have a major problem with it. I can see that it's not ideal, but on the grounds that it's going to cost well over £4,000, isn't it, if she has to put, or he or she has to put the off-road parking in himself?
We don't know exactly how much it would cost.
Okay.
I mean, they could apply for a grant to the council, but from adult social care, but obviously if it's likely to cost thousands. Unless we did the survey, we wouldn't know exactly how much, but many thousands.
So it would be difficult for somebody to pay out that sort of money. Well, it depends how wealthy they are, obviously, but it's not cheap.
And I think if the applicant for the bay had wanted to do that out of their own pocket, they probably would have done, and they wouldn't have applied to the council for either a grant or a bay.
Well, I'm minded to sort of go with it and monitor, see if there are any problems. If there are any problems, then we'll have to rethink, won't we?
Yeah.
So I think the recommendation is to accept that it be installed, yes. So
Right.
I wouldn't say I'm happy with it, but I can see, it's a difficult one, and there's no easy answer, so I would go along with that. Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the last one, is it Langston Road? Am I right? Langston Road traffic calming. And who's doing that? Is it you again, Michelle?
It is Councillor Stagg, yes, thank you. So this is the Langston Road Traffic Calming 2023. The purpose of the report is that following a recent feasibility study considering options for traffic calming at Langston Road, the report has been produced to outline the data analysis carried out and the conclusions and recommendations. The recommendation of the report is that the Cabinet member approves the installation of speed cushions or other appropriate traffic calming measures on Langston Road in Baffin's ward. The decision was reached by a feasibility study which took into account speed survey data, traffic count data and accident reports. We analysed 50 roads. The 50 roads were taken from those which had high levels of casualty and those which had been requested by councillors, residents and other stakeholders such as the emergency services. When these roads were analysed for speed in both directions, it came out that Langston Road was top of the list. A speed survey and traffic count was commissioned in March 2022. Langston Road had an 85th percentile speed, so that's the speed at which 15% or more of the drivers drive in excess of the advertised speed limit, and that was 12.2 miles in excess of the 20 mile an hour speed limit in the eastbound direction and 11.7 miles per hour in excess of the limit in the westbound direction. There is an average daily traffic count of 1,264 on Langston Road in eastbound direction and 1,353 in the westbound direction. There were also 5 recorded accidents on Langston Road within the last 5 years. That further supports the requirement to implement traffic calming measures. There was 3 slight injuries and 2 serious injuries. Cyclists were the most impacted, making up 80% of the casualties on the road. The speed was recorded as 30 mile an hour, 10 mile an hour in excess of the advertised limit in 60% of those accidents reviewed. A number of different options have been assessed. Such as improved signage and lines, vehicle-activated signage, speed humps, but due to the severity of the speeding issues noted and the presence of on-street parking, it's been determined by officers that the installation of rubber speed cushions is the most appropriate solution to address the speeding issues. Funding is required from the parking reserve to enable Portsmouth City Council to progress to detailed design and address these issues, and the construction of traffic calming measures identified as most suitable in the location. That's the synopsis of the report, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney.
I mean, I only have one sort of main question, really. It's about the reference to the survey data. Is there any reason why the list of roads, if you like, and the priority isn't actually included within the report? I know it says that, but we never actually see the data. You know, we are told that's the case. And I don't necessarily doubt it, but it will be interesting to see the data and the other roads that are actually part of this, demand for measures. But we never actually see that. Is there any reason why it isn't included in the report?
Well, if you'd asked for it, well, I suppose you did know what was going in the report. Yeah, fair enough.
Interestingly, and I didn't have it with me this morning, and I may well have got rid of it because they made a paper, but I'm pretty sure that I remember a table that was in, because there was a verbal report initially on this, I think, but there was a table I think I saw which included Langstone, which partially gave that information. When I looked, I thought, I'm sure there was a table in the last one. Unfortunately, I haven't got the original draft version, because I think I may have got rid of it, just to save hold on to paper. But, my question is, why isn't it
You sure?
It wasn't omitted from the report. At the briefing, we had the feasibility study as part of the background information, and that background information is listed in the appendix. But I can certainly just pull that out and send you. That's not a problem. So it was discussed at the briefing meeting. Councillor Heaney is correct there, but it was never part of the text of the report either at briefing or here. But I can send it to you tomorrow. That's not a problem.
I mean, the reason I ask is because at the last meeting we had the Rainbow Corner issue raised, and I asked a question again about where this sits within the priority of other demands. Couldn't really get a sense of why this was the one that was getting the priority, at least not from the answer I got. I couldn't see why that was the reason, and I think it would be helpful both for members, because I don't have the same level of contact and access that you do as the cabinet member to all the data and anything else, and also for members of the public, because we have members of the public who ask us about them. And I've had some residents talking to me over the last couple of weeks about something, and they ask about something, and then it goes into the system, and then it disappears into the system, and then we don't hear anything about it for a hell of a long time. And actually, if we were able to demonstrate when we do agree things, where we are with this, it would help the public perception of what the council is doing, as well as elected members. So I'm just thinking it'd be helpful to provide a bit more information.
I think I'm right in saying that this is it's been on the cards for a long time, and it's one that preceded the prioritisation that's taking place, because of the volume of requests coming in now. That's when we said we needed to start prioritising. And it's because there's so many cars in the city now that it's becoming a major problem. So nothing other than that. So. Okay. Any more?
I hear you saying that you're actually starting to prioritise things, which sounds quite a good idea. I'm not quite sure why, after 3 and a bit years of being sitting on the here, we haven't done that before, really. It does seem a bit, yes, it's good it's being done, but it's being done, very late. And again, I ask that there should be a bit more transparency about the information that is provided to the public, because these are public documents, about what we're doing on prioritisation. I think it would be good if we did that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not anything hidden. It's something that has evolved in response to increasing demand for various things. So,
well, I can say it's not very visible at the moment, because I've been trying to find it out for a good long time, and I'm just about getting to the point where I might be able to see this. So,
yeah. No, I'm quite happy for that to become far more public. There's nothing to hide in there. So, anything else, Councillor Heaney? Councillor Peter Harris, I'm sure you've got a question to ask.
I have actually. How did you know? I'm just using the time, because if I go home too early, I have to do bedtime. So I'm just trying to work it out, so I can get home at a decent time where I don't have to get involved. I think it's a good point from Councillor Heaney that if we can have that information, it'd be great. I'm just going to go into basically, I think it's a really good idea. You know, the numbers stack up. It makes sense. You know, why would you not do it? Just on the financial aspect of it, so it says on design and construction budget, which is 4.6, it says funding is required from the parking reserve, which I believe too, but then it also says in 7.1 that it's a combination of LTP funds within the approved capital programme and the parking reserve. Do we know what the overall number of that budget is being aligned for this scheme?
We don't currently, but we will share that with you when we have the detailed design. Obviously, part of the purpose of the parking reserve is to provide funding for road safety schemes, so it fits the criteria. And there is, within the LTP budget each year, allocated a casualty and speed reduction budget because we have a statutory duty to investigate speeding casualties and to provide either studies or solutions to that. So when a final design and final cost is known, then obviously we'll be able to provide that information. With the current economic situation, it's difficult to put an exact price on it at the moment, but we will be as accurate as possible.
What I'm saying though is, I didn't ask for cost, I asked for budget. Cost and budget are two different things. The budget is assigned for what we're doing for the scheme. The cost will be how much it's actually going to cost. Just because it's a budget doesn't mean it's a limit. It's not a target. So what I want to know is what the actual budget is, because if we were to say to pass this today and not identify how much it's going to cost or identify the funding, I don't think that'd be a good idea. Just I want to know what the budget is.
Are you going?
Just bear with me 1 second.
I just thought it's prudent to ask. It's not in the report.
Just to say that there are feasibility budgets that are set, and I think part of the improvements we're trying to put through is working past the budget, doing a lot more design work up front so we can narrow that down. But this is one of those schemes that was predated some of the feasibility improvements that we put in place, and that was, I think, Lynn's point earlier. We certainly have always prioritised, but what we're trying to do now is do more work to help the prioritisation, which is what we were trying to do, and reduce that to go from budget to cost, or closer to cost anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. It's more so there's no cost in it, where every single other report we've looked at today has had a cost in, and this one hasn't. So I just want to get an idea of what the budget is, because it doesn't have to. It might not cost that much. It might cost a lot less.
Or it might cost more because we don't know how many speed cushions need to be put in.
Oh, don't say that, Councillor. We don't want to spend more money. You want to save your budget.
No, we could actually save. But I mean, it's one of those things. What do you do? Do you do half a scheme?
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I just want to know what we set for it so it makes sense.
Yeah, that's where the parking reserve comes in.
The estimated budget that went into the feasibility work that we did was £100,000. When that progresses to detailed design, obviously we'll be able to give an updated figure on that. Langston Road is 700 metres long, and the recommended spacing for speed humps is between 70 and 150 metres. So that was what the pricing was based on.
That's fine. I think Langston Road is a really long road, and I don't envy those people that knock doors down there, i.e. your mob. So, it's a long road. I understand that. But no, thank you for that. And that's really all I've got to ask.
I'm sure the residents will be absolutely ecstatic at having something to cut down the speeding. I will say that the speeding is mainly, from my observations, in the evenings rather than in the daytime, because in the daytime there isn't the need to speed, whereas at night time, because of the parked cars, there's nowhere to pass, and so they go hell for leather from one end to the other, and because most of it is going straight through, because there are very few roads off it apart from Kimbolton and Litchfield, etc. So yes, I'm very happy to approve that, and so will the residents be. So thank you very much. Thank you for all the work that's gone into it, into the whole programme today, and thank you for your time. That's including you, Councillor Peter Harris.